the nations stand against you? Who among them is your friend? The king is calling from his throne in Jerusalem, seeking those that he might send. The Holy Spirit is my armor, the Word of God is my sword, and I am going into battle for Zion in the army of the Lord. And I am going into battle for Zion in the army of the Lord. So be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Be alert with perseverance.
Of Israel. By virtue of the national and historical rights of the Jewish people and of the resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations, we hereby proclaim the establishment of the Jewish state in Palestine to be called Israel.
Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day?
Now, okay, we're going to be moving on to another subject now. Okay, and the wrath of Allah, the Middle East, at the dawn of Islam. You know, we're going to go into more of the history at this point now, within the doctrine and stuff. We've covered a lot of ground there already. Now, what I want to do is I want to go in and start getting some of the historical stuff into this. Okay, and what you have, okay, this is the Middle East. This is a map of the Middle East, and of course across here is Persia, Babylon, Iraq, Egypt, Arabia, Israel right here. You have what's now Turkey here, okay, but in these days it was a little bit different, okay. You have the Eastern Roman Empire, okay, also known as the Byzantine Empire, okay, It was ruled by the Emperor Heraclius at the time of the Arabian attacks. And that was roughly this area here of the Eastern Mediterranean. And have a better map here, a larger map here that I can lift up to show you. It have been this area, across the Eastern Mediterranean here, around the basin. Here's Israel, Syria, this area of modern Turkey, Anatolia. Right here we had the capital of Constantinople, modern Islamic city of Istanbul was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire at the time, which covered Greece and North Africa. And lots of people think that the Roman Empire fell with the last emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus. That is wrong. It did not. The Western Empire fell and ceased to exist in about 476. But the Eastern Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, it was an Orthodox Christian empire, and it existed all the way until the year 1453, which was just a few years before Columbus set sail on his exploration voyages that brought him to North America. And so that should give you some thought there about the Roman Empire and about the way you may have thought about history or not thought about history, as the case may be. Okay. Now we have the Persian Empire of this time period. Right here, there's been many a rise and fall with Persia. We're seeing a rise today with their current ruler Ahmadinejad with Shia Islam. Okay. But at this time, Iran, or Persia, was ruled by the Sasanian dynasty of Shahs, and it was ruled by the Shah Yazdegerd III at the time of the Arabian attacks. Okay, these two empires have been enemies since the days of Julius Caesar. Okay, these back and forth empires that had fought back and forth ever since the days of Julius Caesar and Herod, Yeshua. Those days and in fact, in the days of Yeshua, the Persian Empire was called, it was a Parthian Empire, the Partho-Persian Empire. And we'll get into more of that later. But they had these empires, Rome and Persia, had been enemies since the days of Julius Caesar. Many bitter wars had been fought in the years just before the Islamic invasions. A long and bitter war had been fought, which ended in the destruction of the Persian capital city, Ctesiphon, AD 627, at the hands of the Roman army. Now this city, it was about roughly in right here, in this part of Iraq. It was modern Iraq. It was just south of the city of Babylon, which is in this area here, and it was on the plain down there, and it was the Iranian capital at the time. And the Eastern Roman army sacked and burned it. And this is they had long series of wars, and what had happened is the Shahs of Persia had swept across here and overran all these areas of the Eastern Roman Empire. And this at the same time as we've just been discussing, the Muhammad's rise in Arabia was going on here. At the same time, all this constant wars was going on. There's mention in the Quran about the Romans in there, and it's talking about the Eastern Empire. And as a result, both empires were exhausted, and they weren't able to stand up to the Islamic attacks, either one of them. Okay, now these two superpowers, okay, at the time, the Eastern Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, okay, each had a state religion. Okay, state religion is nothing new under the sun. Okay, the Roman Empire, we have Eastern Orthodox Christians, and they were under the Emperor and the Patriarch of Constantinople. And in this church, the Christians also of various Eastern rites, the Copts in Egypt, Jacobites in Syria, Nestorians in Assyria, and the Chaldean Christians in Babylon, and the Armenian churches, etc., 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 across this region here. And Now Persia, Iran, this is, keep in mind now, this is pre-Islam. Well, right, it's not. I guess you could say it's pre-Islam because it was right there on the as Islam was beginning its rise. It had already conquered Arabia. But be that as it may, you have the state religion of Iran. Persia is Zoroastrian religion. Okay, it's a religion handed down from the prophet Zoroaster. It believes in one God, Ahura Mazda. Very powerful clergy. Some of the Magi were probably Zoroastrians, and you remember the story of the Magi from our studies of Scripture. The Rav Mag, the Partho-Persian Magi who came to see the baby Yeshua. And these Magi were not just three wise men on camels. They were a Partho-Persian army group that came down there, and that's why all of Jerusalem was upset when they got there, is because you know, they had just come off of a series of wars with Persia, and all of a sudden Herod here, you know, all of a sudden Herod had to fight his way into Jerusalem to get to claim his title. He had to fight his way through a Parthian army, and then so when this new force arrives out there, of course he's upset and understand. And the Magi mock him when they go in there. These Persians mock him. They say, "Where is he who was born king of the Jews?" Because they knew that Herod knew himself he was not the legitimate king of the Jews, and so that also the Magi knew that, and they mocked him when they came in there. Okay, now the other empires at the time, you had the Sogdian Empire and the Empire of the August Turks, not the August Turks, not like the month of August on the Roman calendar. No, the Turks in August have turkey in August except on Thanksgiving. No. Okay, the Empire of the August Turks. These August Turks later become the Seleucid Turks of a few centuries after this. Okay, and these August Turks were at this time up in the area of Uzbekistan. The Sogdian Empire covers modern Afghanistan. Okay, and then you had over in China, you had during the Tang Dynasty of China. Okay, now this was an age of barbarians. Okay, there's lots of ages of barbarians, I guess. You know, they cross. But when you think of Conan the Barbarian, I'll be back. You know, an army of Conans sweeping up out of the frozen north of Europe, sweeping down on the people of the east and destroying their villages. You know, they had the Eastern Roman Empire was attacked and invaded by various barbarians. Okay, during this time, you had before that you had the Huns. You heard of Attila the Hun. You had Theodoric and the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths under Odoacer. And you had and these lead up. Okay, now right at the time that Islam is starting to arise, or right before it's starting to arise, you had the Visigoths going into Spain, and they rule Spain. And I have another map here that I can show you of the Western Mediterranean region. Spain, right here, you have the Visigoths coming down through France, down into Spain, and here they establish the Visigothic kingdom in Spain around 575 in that era. And then at the same time, these Visigoths had wars with the Eastern Roman Empire, which had moved back up and reconquered Italy, moved across. And you also had the Vandals, which had moved down through here and crossed over the Strait of Gibraltar here and moved and took over the city of Carthage, which is modern Tunis. And the Eastern Roman army under General Belisarius in the time of Justinian had moved up and conquered them, and then reconquered southern Spain as the Eastern Empire was attempting to regain the western provinces, and it never fully succeeded, as they had the Persians on their back. So they had a two-front war. And then in 575 through 631, you had the Visigoths ruling Spain, into Spain. Then you had Lombards. It sounds like some sort of fancy sports car. Let me drive me a Lombard. Okay, and the Lombards into Italy, 568 through 690. And Lombards invading Italy down in here, okay? And then you have the Avars into the Balkans, okay? And the Balkan Peninsula is our map of Eastern Europe again. You have the Balkans here. You have the Avars moving down into this region here. Okay, keep them all. Here's Athens, Greece, right here. This is the Aegean Sea, and then you have the capital of the Eastern Empire here in Constantinople, which is now the city of Istanbul. And for contemporary times, this is the modern area of the former Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Albania, Macedonia. Over here we have Italy. Here's North Africa, Egypt, and Crete, and so on and so forth. But you have the Avars into the Balkans, 675 through 681. Now, these invasions from out of Central and Eastern Europe, along with the wars with Persia, together with overtaxation. Now, we feel that in our own country today, don't we? The liberals going to overtax us. You know, hey, you thought dinosaurs were extinct? No, they're not extinct at all. We had one in office for 8 years. He came from Arkansas. It was called the Arkansaurus taxuspendus. Oh, I resent that remark. I know about that. I read in the paper, Dad, don't be talking about me that way. Said Bill, I'm Bill Clinton. I'm not the Arkansaurus taxuspendus. Dad, gummit. Oh, okay. Anyway, the overtaxation, religious oppression by the state churches based in the city of Constantinople, modern Istanbul, left the empire of Pax Romanus Imperium weak and impoverished. It was the same for Persia. They were unable to withstand the advance of the Arabian Empire under the Caliph Omar, but the Romans survived. Persia was overrun and converted by the sword to Islam. Fact. Okay, we have some important chronology that we're going to start to deal with here. The Islamic chronology. They're 634 is the beginning of Omar's caliphate. That's when he takes over, because Muhammad has passed away, and he takes over the reins of the empire. Okay, 636, the Arabs defeat the Romans in Israel on the Yarmouk River. Arabs seize Syria and Jerusalem, and Omar prays on the Temple Mount. Okay, the map of Israel here, and you have the Yarmouk River is right here, and this is right here. Okay, here's Jerusalem. You have the Jordan River Valley here. Here's Jericho, the Dead Sea, the Gaza Strip, and then here's Haifa. Here's Nazareth, the Sea of Galilee, to give you some references here. Here's an even bigger map here, archaeological map. This section here. Okay, the Yarmouk River here. This pilgrim map here. This is where the Eastern Roman army finally met its fate. The Roman army who had been here in occupying in various guises and circumstances ever since the days of Pompey and Cleopatra. It was finally crushed for all time and driven north and completely out of there, and never was a Roman force ever to regain the Holy Land. It was permanently, except for the times of the Crusades, it was Islam all the way up until the time it was re-inhabited by the Jewish people, and the Muslims were expelled. As far as political ruling now, they weren't really expelled. You know, the Jews don't believe in driving people out, but unless they absolutely have to defend themselves from suicide bombers. Okay. Now, in 637, the Arabs destroyed the Persian army at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in Babylonia, which you know is Iraq, and they sacked the Persian capital of Ctesiphon again. The second time within a few years, the Persians had just come off of a long war, having it sacked by the Romans, and then now it was sacked again and destroyed by the Arabs, and it is in ruin to this day. And the Qadisiyah is roughly in southwestern Iraq of Babylonia. And that was the Persian army. They just completely collapsed, and the Arabs overran this whole thing here. Okay, and it was converted by sword. Okay, and the year 640, we had General Amir ibn al-As conquers Egypt. Over here, they moved across and invade Egypt. 642, Alexandria fell to the Arabs. They sacked the city and destroyed, and the library was destroyed. All those books and everything was destroyed, and the Romans fled, never again to return to Egypt. They had been there ever since the days of Cleopatra and Pompey, Julius Caesar, and all of that whole thing there, and they were never to return. And then in 656, you get a Muslim civil war going. 660, Muawiyah was a man named Muawiyah, one of the Russians. He was proclaimed the Caliph. And then you have Islamic capital. It was moved from Mecca to Damascus. No, it was not moved from Mecca to Medina. It was not moved from Mecca to Jerusalem like the Arabs stayed. There never was at any time in a Muslim capital in Jerusalem. Never. Moved to Damascus, and there you have the start of the Umayyad dynasty of the Arab Empire. 670, the Arabs overrun everything from Spain to India. And a lot of territory, people. There was no peace, was there? There was no Israel either. And there was no peace. The Muslims were attacking and everything. It was there. The first crusade was not a Christian crusade. The Christian crusades were finally reactions to centuries of Muslim crusades against them. Okay? There was a reaction there, okay? And 732, the Arab invasion of Western Europe was stopped. Okay, we'll back up a bit. And they went into Spain and conquered and destroyed the Visigoths, crossed the Pyrenees, and now they're in France, all the way up into Western Europe, right outside the gates of Paris. Paris wasn't really much of a city then. It was more of a castle, a fortress. And Charles Martel, the Franks. The Franks are a Germanic barbarian tribe that are the ancestors of the modern French. So even the French are German, and they won't like to hear that their ancestors were Germans, but they were. The French are a combination of Franks and Gauls and Celtic peoples. Okay, and Charles Martel stopped the Muslims at Tours and drove them back over the Pyrenees Mountains. Okay. Now the next part here, we're going to deal in the Wrath of Allah, is we're going to deal with the Crusades. Okay? A crusade. Now, your image when we talk about a crusade is going to be the one of two things. It's going to be either knights on horses, or it's going to be like Billy Graham on a crusade or something like that. Okay, a crusade, it can be defined as a vigorous fight for a cause. A vigorous fight for a cause. In modern day America, evangelist Christian preachers refer to their circuit preaching tours as crusades. Examples: Reverend Billy Graham. However, in history, the Catholic popes of Rome announced holy war to drive the Seljuk Turkish Muslims out of Jerusalem and the land of Israel. The Sultanate of Konya of the Seljuk Turks, also called the Sultanate of Rum, were Islamic radicals who persecuted the people of the book, Jews and Christians both. Okay. This is going to necessitate our first real look at the Turks in this, okay? You have Central Asia today. You have you have Kazakhstan. You really can't see all of Kazakhstan here because our map is not big enough. But you can see a little tiny piece of it here. Okay, with Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and then Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is really not Turkish, but they're kind of more of a descendant of Persians, but they're in that area, in that mix there. And you have Azerbaijan, and then up in Russia you have the people like the Dagestanis and the Tatars and people like that. Those are Turks, okay? And the peoples we know as the Turks not only inhabit Asia Minor and the Middle East, but in regions of the Caucasus, west of the Caspian Sea, all of Central Asia, north of Persia, and east of the Caspian Sea, north to Siberia, and east into China. This entire region is known by the name of Turkestan, okay? And then, well, I just reviewed those up there on the map, but I'll tell you again, the countries of Turkestan and beyond. You have Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Turkey itself, okay? This is the descendant of Turkish migrations over here, of Seljuk Turks and later Ottoman Turks, okay? And dealing with the Turks here again, the most important group and that you need to concentrate on now will be the Seljuk Turks. And the Seljuks consists of various nomadic tribes who have migrated from Central Asia and the Altai region of Mongolia into Persia and Iraq, and they converted to Sunni Islam. The tribes were ruled by emirs who pledged loyalty to a sultan. And then the Seljuk tribes, you have the Great Eastern Seljuks ruled in eastern Persia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan. Western Great Seljuks ruled central Persia, Armenia, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Arabia. Seljuks of Rome ruled in the northern Syria, Cilicia, and Anatolia, land seized from the Eastern Roman Empire, and its capital was Konya. Okay, now the sequence of Seljuk history is you have to know why we're dealing in an era of the Crusades, okay, and you have to know who the people are who spawned the Crusades and why. The Crusades were a reaction to Islamic crusades against the West, okay, and this Seljuks were the final ones that their attacks brought on appeals for help from the Eastern Roman Empire to Western Europe, and it was their outrages and persecutions of people over non-Muslims on their way to Israel, which causes them to launch their crusades. And in the 990s, the Seljuk Turks from Central Asia convert to Islam and move towards Persia. 1030s, the Seljuks are in northeastern Persia, or Khorasan, here. 1040, Seljuks overthrow the Ghaznavid rulers of Persia and conquer the regions east of Mount Ararat. In 1055, you had Sultan Togrelbeg rules the Seljuk Empire from Baghdad. Togrelbeg, it sounds like some sort of a shish kebab or something. Hey, give me a spiced Togrelbeg there, and make sure it has plenty of paprika and hot sauce. Okay, now you may wonder, since we kind of left off with the history of Arabia and we didn't cover a whole lot of that as to how the Muslim capital got into Baghdad, was that over the centuries the Arab Caliphate had broken up into various dynasties. After the overthrow of the Umayyad dynasty by General Abbas, the capital had been moved from Damascus and they built the city of Baghdad, and which replaced the city of Babylon as the main city in Iraq. And they built Baghdad, and over the centuries, the rule of the Abbasid caliphs declined, and the whole empire broke up. Politically, broke up into various states, and then until the caliph in Baghdad only ruled in the area of modern Iraq, and then he was occupied by the Turks, and he remained as a figurehead while the Turks actually ruled politically, and he was just kind of a constitutional monarch in the way that Queen Elizabeth would be of Britain today. Okay, and the Toghrul Beg ruled the Seljuk Empire from Baghdad. 1063 to 73, the rule of Sultan Arp Arslan. Now that sounds like a Hollywood comedian. It's the Arp Arslan show. Okay. The Seljuks launched a jihad against the Christians, and they crushed the Eastern Roman army at the Battle of Manzikert, and that's the modern city of Malazgirt, which is in below Lake Van, around that area in Armenia, but it's ruled by Turkey even today. They conquered eastern Anatolia and the cities of Iconium, Ansara, and the biblical Galatia, and a war. They also had a war with the Fatimid rulers of Egypt. Now, Fatimid was part of the family of the prophet, daughter-in-law of the prophet Muhammad. And you notice in Catholicism they have Our Lady of Fatima. Well, Fatima, she's a Muslim. Okay, so I'll let you guys chew on that a bit and see, and maybe that'll fund your research to how that came about. But the Fatimid Caliphate, was rulers over Egypt for a while, and 1073 through 1092, the Sultan Malik Shah rules with the Persian named Nazil Mulmuk as the Grand Vizier. So he had a Persian, an Iranian, who helped him rule the Seljuk Empire. And it's amazing because Nazil Mulmuk would have been a Shiite because he was Iranian, but yet the Seljuks were Orthodox Sunni, so go figure that. Okay? And the 1080, the Seljuk army continues its jihad against the Eastern Romans in Smyrna. The south shores of the Sea of Marmara, south of Constantinople, all fall. In 1094, the Roman Emperor Alexis Comnenus first pleads to Western Europe for help against the Islamic Jihad. 1095, Pope Urban II preaches the First Crusade. 1098, armies of the Knights of the First Crusade destroy the Seljuk army in Anatolia at the Battle of Dorialium. And then in 1099, July 15th, the Knights led by Godfrey Billon of France conquer Jerusalem. Muslims are slaughtered, the Jews are burned alive in a synagogue. The Dome of the Rock becomes a Catholic church, and then a Muslim civil war starts. And with 1090, a Muslim civil war starts. The Shiite groups called Ismailis battle the Sunni Turks, and as we see, these crusaders were not all followers of Yeshua. In fact, they committed butchery in the Jewish communities going across Europe and having contests to see how many little Jewish babies they could put on the sword. And you ask why a lot of Orthodox and other Jews refuse to believe in Jesus is because so many of the people have been slaughtered in his name. There's no coincidence. You had different groups of Lutherans. I'm not all condemning all Lutherans by any stretch of the imagination, but in Germany, you had Lutherans goose-stepping with the Nazis right in that Nazi Reich, okay? And because they have been taught a replacement theology, but then again, that's a theological class, and we're dealing right now with the history of Islam, not a theology of that. So, anyway, you have 1127 to 1173, Seljuk Turks in Syria ruled by emirs of the Zangidid dynasty fight the jihad against the Crusader states, and they lose. Okay, let's go into more detail with the Crusades here. The First Crusade. These Crusades are over a course of 200 years, a total of 5 major and several minor Crusades set out from Christian Europe with the declared aim of either recapturing or protecting the Holy Lands from the Muslims. And the first, November 27th of 1095, by Pope Urban, he had a vast number of people, about 100,000, trying to join up with this. And for the Pope, the expedition was a response to Byzantine appeals for help in the wake of the Turkish conquest that we just discussed. And so Pope Urban calls upon the nobles of Europe to defend the West and the Church against the Islamic Jihad. The Seljuks, they had been persecuting Christian pilgrims, and on the way to Jerusalem, in addition to the onslaught of the Seljuk Ghazis and Mujahideen against the Eastern Roman Empire, the Eastern Orthodox Church was in serious danger, and Christians were being persecuted in the regions of the Imperium Romanus, and the Ghazis had seized, in Anatolia. At Clermont in France in 1095, the Pope, he called the nobility to march to Jerusalem, and but first, what you had was a crusade of peasants led by Peter the Hermit, marched over there, and they came down the Danube River and through the Balkans, and once they got to the eastern capital, the Romans ferried them across the Straits of Bosporus, and the Seljuks slaughtered Peter the Hermit's peasants. It's known as the Peasants' Crusade. And then the Islamic Turkish Ghazis massacred those people. And now what you had, the Godfrey and Raymond, the Flemish northern French knights led by Godfrey, set out, and a column of knights from the south of France led by Raymond, the Count of Toulouse, set out. They marched to Constantinople, and the Romans ferried them across the straits, just like they had done Peter the Hermit. Battle was joined by Raymond against the Seljuks at Doryalium, that's modern Iskashir. He was nearing defeat when Godfrey and the Flemish northern French knights led by Godfrey set out, and a column of knights from the south of France led by Raymond, the Count of Toulouse, set out. They marched to Constantinople, and the Romans ferried them across the straits, just like they had done Peter the Hermit. Battle was joined by Raymond against the Seljuks at Doryalium, that's modern Iskashir. He was nearing defeat when Godfrey and the Flemish knights arrived in time, and they destroyed the Seljuk army there. And in the next year, of course, they captured Jerusalem and established the kingdom of Jerusalem, with Godfrey crowned as the first king of Jerusalem. And of course, you know, he was in a way, he's kind of almost like a picture of anti-Messiah, and in fact Antichrist, because he goes in and he slaughters all these people in Jerusalem and declares himself king. And we know that Yeshua is the only true king of Jerusalem. And these Crusaders established states that lasted from about 1099 to 1291. And the kingdom of Jerusalem, which was located in the land of Israel itself. You have the county of Tripoli, which is Lebanon, not to be confused with the Tripoli that's the capital of Libya, 2 different places, okay? The principality of Antioch in northern Syria, and you'll know Antioch from your study in the book of Acts, okay? The kingdom of Lesser Armenia that included Cilicia and Tarsus. Cilicia is a region right around here. Here's Antioch, and this area is called Cilicia, and it's the same area where Paul of Tarsus was from. Tarsus is a city of Cilicia. And then the county of Edessa, that's eastern Cilicia. And now the Crusaders are very famous for their castles, this wonderful monumental architecture that stands to this day, and it's just a tremendous architecture. I recommend you get some pictures or video and view those castles, or if you go on a trip to the Middle East, go to Beaufort Castle. It's a wonderful, it's a good experience there if you want to see good castles there. You have the Croix de Chevalier, Beaufort, the Croix de Moab, the Croix de Montreal, and Edom. You know, the city of Petra was used as a Crusader fortress, and then there was a Croix de Tournesol in Cilicia. They had a series of these fortresses that were along the coast, and some of them in the interior of the Holy Land. You have also the Croix d'Acre in Israel, which is the modern city of Akka. In Israel is also a Crusader castle there in Acre, or Akka in Israel, and it was used by the British as prison during their occupation before the rebirth of the nation of Israel. And the chronology of the Crusades is this: 1096 through 1099, you had the First Crusade, and which we just discussed. In 1147 through 1149, there's the Second Crusade, which was a troop of reinforcements for the First Crusade. Then 1189 through 1192 is the most famous crusade of all, and the King Richard the Lionheart. The Jerusalem had 100 years passed, and Jerusalem had fallen to Salah ad-Din and the Muslim armies, and there's a really good movie that depicts that fall, and it's a movie called The Kingdom of Heaven, and you would really enjoy it. It's a good movie. It's very exciting, and you get to see the Knights Templars and their white tunics with the red crosses, and they did a really fantastic job with that. And I kind of always pictured Richard the Lionheart as being Sean Connery playing that part of Richard the Lionheart, and he would do if they would make a movie specifically about him, then Sean Connery would be an excellent choice of an actor for that. But anyway, they were trying to regain Jerusalem from Salah ad-Din in the Ayyubid dynasty. Salah ad-Din was a Muslim crusader, and he established a Islamic state called the Ayyubid Sultanate across there, and he reduced the other Muslim states around, and then when he had the Crusader states completely surrounded, then he moved on them, and he destroyed the army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem at the Battle of Hattin in the Galilee, and the buzzards ate the bodies of the Crusaders. The Crusaders were starved for water, and the Muslims annihilated them. And the king of Jerusalem at the time was Guy de Luzo, and he was captured by Salah ad-Din and stripped down to his underwear and paraded backwards on a donkey out there. Okay, and the kings of Europe respond, send a crusade down there, and King Richard of England, Philip Augustus of France, and Kaiser Friedrich Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire of Germany. And the German troops never really made it down there. Kaiser Friedrich was drowned while crossing a river in Anatolia, and most of the Germans went home. Few made it down there, but most of the Germans withdrew back to the Reich, the First Reich, the Holy Roman Empire. Not to be confused with the Eastern Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire, that's a completely different subject, but what it was a medieval state that existed across Central Europe, with a pope in Rome as spiritual ruler, and the Kaiser of Germany as political ruler, and the capital was in Augsburg, Germany. Okay, then this crusade, Third Crusade, ultimately failed and withdrew, and they failed to recapture the city. In 1202 to 1204, the Fourth Crusade, it betrays and attacks Constantinople. Okay, the Crusader states, they had been saved from extinction by the Third Crusade, but the Fourth Crusade was diverted to conquer Constantinople, and its aftermath saw the creation of a series of Latin states on former Eastern Roman territory. Now, the Eastern Roman Empire, of course, was later it just a few years after that was revived, but it never fully recovered its power. And then you have the Fifth Crusade attack Egypt, and with contingents from Germany, Italy, Austria, Hungary, England, and France appeared close to success in Egypt before its final defeat in 1221. The French king Louis the Ninth invested enormous resources on crusading in the east, but his Egyptian expedition of 1249 to 50, it ended in disaster. And the powerful Mamluk state, which had replaced the Ayyubids after 1250, was initially more concerned with the imminent threat from the Mongols, but as that receded, the Mamluk advance proved relentless, culminating in 1291 in the fall of Acre in the last major Crusader strongholds of the Middle East. Okay, and then you had so that Sixth Crusade, Kaiser Friedrich negotiated with the Sultan and Christians to regain Jerusalem, but as I said, the Mamluks and the Khwarizm, okay, took that. The Seventh Crusade from 1248 to 54, that attacked Egypt, and then you have the 1270 to 8th Crusade attacked Tunis. It was also led by Louis the Ninth. And then 1290, you have the Khwarizm Turks, and also the Mamluks seized Jerusalem. And then, of course, we just mentioned the fall of Acre, the last Crusader state. And what you ended up having was this crusading movement between 1095 and 1291 is striking evidence of a militaristic nature of Western aristocratic culture. And so you had these military orders, the Knights Templars and the Hospitallers, the military orders of knights were established in there. And like the Hospitallers, what they were established in 1139 as a military order of the Hospital of St. John, and you know, so that's why they were called Hospitallers. And then the Templars were established because they were supposed to defend the Temple Mount, so they're the Knights Templars. And there's a modern, it's continued down. They were put, a lot of the Templars were put to sword by the French king in the Middle Ages, and they became a very powerful order. And then they have to this day the Scottish Rites Templars that still wear the colorful tunics and stuff. And but you know, even after 1291, the crusading, it remains deeply rooted in the idea of chivalry. You know, the knights and noble knights and all that kind of thing going on. So that is going to cover our topic on the Crusades. And the next time we take this up, we will be discussing the decline of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire from about 1025 to up into the 1500s. And that will conclude this session right now. And may the Lord God bless you and keep you, and may He make His face to shine upon you, and may He lift up His countenance towards you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.
Shomer Israel.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that little interlude here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cover the period of the end of the Eastern Roman Empire. And Rome had lots of zeniths that, rise, periods when it was weak and periods when it was strong. But the eastern half of the Roman Empire, it reached its zenith between the 9th and the 11th centuries. And by that point, it had consolidated its territorial possessions, and it enjoyed great economic prosperity at that time, due to the fact that gold and things had begun to be traded again around the Mediterranean area. And but what happened is, we discussed in the Crusades that these Crusaders came up and attacked the wrong state. Excuse me, you're supposed to be going after, you were hired to go after the Islamic jihadis and not to attack the Byzantine Empire. And they did, and they had a Norman that was crowned emperor in Constantinople, but the Greeks continued, the Greco-Eastern Romans continued to resist this, and there were various Latin states that were set up around and on its territories. And finally, what happened was that was in 1057, the empires attacked on all sides, and the west, the Normans settled in Byzantine Italy. The Balkans and the Pachanags, the Turkish tribes, they took control of Macedonia and Thrace in the east. Then, of course, the Seleucids had taken in there, and those were mentioned there. Some other things that had happened to it in the Balkan area. We've been concentrating on what was going on in its far eastern areas. Well, those tribes had come in its Balkan and its western areas, and so it had been reduced over there. And then you have these Crusaders again. They divided. They formed independent governments, and the empire was divided up by the Latins, and then they had the customs. Venice and the Italian states began to dominate the trade at the expense of the empire, and then the Greeks regained control of Constantinople from the Latins and reestablished for the empire. But by that time, you had the rise of the Ottoman Turks on there come up, and then they were, when they're weak in condition, they were unable to resist that. The Ottoman Turks swept in and surrounded the city of Constantinople and laid siege to it. And this was the first time they had used cannon. But at this point, gunpowder had been invented. The Turks were using artillery. They blasted through the walls with cannon and artillery at Constantinople, and they killed the last Roman emperor, and the great church of Hagia Sophia was the big Gothic Eastern Cross that was up on top of it was torn down, and a crescent moon was put up, and true to the Islamic jihadi tradition, they took over that church and converted it into a mosque. And then Eastern Roman resistance continued, though, after the fall of Constantinople. It continued from the city of Patras and in Corinth, and also in Trebizond, and then finally those areas a few years later were overcome and destroyed by Mehmed the Conqueror, and the Empire of Caesar was at an end. And So now we'll go into the Ottoman Empire here that arose there, that committed this deed. Okay, it ended the reign of Caesar's empire after 1,000 years. Okay, the wrath of Allah, the Ottoman Empire. And from out of the aftermath of the breakup of the Seljuk Empire, the Crusades, and you can also we haven't even talked about the Mongol invasions that went on during that time. That's a whole other subject there. Okay, the Mongols that had come across there during that time, sacked and burned Baghdad, and then a Mongol army had went as far as the valley of Megiddo in Israel and was defeated by the Mamelukes there at a battle of Armageddon, not the battle of Armageddon that we think of in Scripture, but there was indeed a battle of Armageddon between the Mamluk Turks and the Mongols under Hulagu Khan. And Hulagu hated Muslims so bad that he used to sack and burn their cities and then cut their heads off and build pyramids of skulls, you know. He was the original Max Headroom across Asia, real bloody individual. Okay, and the Ottoman Empire is still with us today. It's the modern nation of Turkey, and the Ottoman Turkish state founded in the late 1200s by the warrior Etrogol, 400 cavalry. And at that time, this group converted to Islam, and its first sultan was Osman or Uthman, from whence the name Osmanli Turks or Ottoman Turks come from. His reign begins in 1299, and the Ottoman Empire was among the great imperial powers of history. No doubt it was. It was a very powerful state, and at one time it was a very grave danger to Western Europe because of its Sunni jihadist tendencies. Okay, so its period of expansion was 1282 to 1683, and then this includes 2 sieges of Vienna, Austria. Ottoman armies ended up in the heart of Europe at one point. Okay, and they were the last siege led by Mustafa, or Pasha Black Mustafa, up there, and they were stopped by a league, but alliances of Poland and some other countries. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The period of decline, 1684 through 1923, but as we have said, it never truly all the way declined because Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, he overthrew the Sultan and the Caliphate and established the Republic of Turkey, which is with us to this day. And its greatest extent, the Ottoman Empire, it ruled everything from the Caspian Sea all the way to Algeria, from Egypt to the Ukraine, all the Balkan Peninsula of southeastern Europe. All this territory was gained by a continuous Islamic jihad against Orthodox Christians and also against the Shiite Muslims in the Middle East, who the Sunni Ottomans considered to be heretics. And the Ottomans were more harsh to Shiites than they were against Christians or Jews, and that was just because the Shiites are considered heretics by the Sunnis, and which put them at odds with the Shia of Persia. And that's one of the things that kept the Ottoman Empire off balance, is the fact that it had to fight a 2-front war. It was going against the states in the west. At the same time, it had the Persians, the Shiite Persians, always involved in some sort of an intrigue on their backside, and then, you know, sending assassins and things like this into their capital and all that. So they had a constant fight there. 1453, the Ottomans captured the last capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, and that we've already discussed. Now, their first capital was in the city of Eskişehir in Turkey, and that's the city of Doralium. And then from there it was moved to the city of Bursa. And then from there, once the Ottomans had gained a foothold on the European continent after crossing the Hellespont, or the Dardanelles, just right here, they crossed over from right up here, and they gained Hadrianopolis or Adrianople. It's called Edirne. They renamed it Edirne and made it a capital. And then from there, they moved it to they captured Constantinople and renamed it Istanbul in 1453 and moved their capital there. and it was there until 1923, and then it was moved to the city of Ankara, which is the ancient city in antiquity. It was called Ankara, and then it got the name Angora. I don't think that has anything to do with Angora sheep or wool or anything like that. I don't know if there was a thriving wool trade there or not. There probably was, but and it was named Ankara, renamed Ankara, and that's where the Ottoman Turkish, the capital of the Republic of Turkey is to this day, is there. Okay, and they're a part of NATO, and they are a secular government now. Mustafa Kemal got rid of the Islamic rule there, but the radical Islam is trying to come back and retake Turkey, and we'll see what happens there. And their governmental system was, and as it was established by Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror in the 1400s, and this system lasted all the way until the 1860s, and when a reform movement arises, and this reform movement was came about right around the time that Sultan Abdulaziz makes his trips over into visiting France and Britain, and he was the first sultan to visit outside the boundaries of the Ottoman state, except at the head of a jihadist army. So the Ottoman government, up until 1923, it was referred to in the West as a Sublime Porte. And the reason this is because they had, in Turkish times, they had the tents, and they had the portals there, their poles were called, and then what they would do from these tents, the Sultan's tent, they would distribute law, and that tradition carried on until they started using the palace gate as that. So in a way, the Turks carried on the tradition that had been in play ever since the days of Lot. You remember, he used to sit in the gate of the city of Sodom before that was destroyed by God. And a judge sitting in the gate, that was an important office. And so the West started calling the Ottomans the Sublime Porte. You know, you have this chart here, and this is a chart that I've drawn up here, and we'll try and pan the camera into it so you can see the chart. It's an important chart that you need to see because it took a while to put it together because of the structure of the Ottoman government was very hard to put that together because it was kind of confusing. Now, that's the best I can do at this point here. You won't be able to read it, but I will tell you what each one of these are. Okay, now, the structure of the Sublime Porte. Okay, the Europeans called it Sublime Porte. Okay, this chart. Okay, you have. They considered Allah, okay, their God, Allah, not our God, theirs, Allah, to be on top. And you have it, okay. Then under him you have the Sultan. Okay, now it goes this way, and you call it, you have the Sultan, the Sapihis, the palace troops and bodyguard. Okay, and then off that you have the Janissary military corps, the Sultan's elite infantry, and state police. Okay, they report directly to the Sultan. Now, coming down on this side, you have a guy they call the Chief of the White Eunuchs, and he was in charge of the Sultan's court personnel and the palace school. And then you have the White Eunuchs, the court personnel, and the palace pages and staff. They're eunuchs, the White Eunuchs. Okay, and then following the chart down this way, you have the Grand Mufti. And this is, you heard, the Grand Mufti was the interpreter of Islamic law. And there was at one time a Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Husseini, who was a supporter of Adolf Hitler in World War II. Okay, but that's another, we'll save that for a later time. Okay, and under him was a regional muftis and mullahs, and then of course who were in charge of all the mosques. Okay, now over here, you have on the religious side, you have the chief rabbi, the Jews, and then of course synagogues, and then you have the patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and then you have, of course, the churches. Now, underneath the Sultan over here is the government itself. You have the Grand Vizier. This state council is called the Divan, and that was named after what they used to sit on. So you may have heard of a couch called the Divan. Okay, you have 4 pillars of the Ottoman government. Okay, and it's kind of modeled after the structure of Islam in that way. Okay, you have the 5 pillars of Islam. Well, you have the 4 pillars of the Ottoman state. Okay, the first pillar is the Grand Vizier. He's the prime minister. He's kind of like Joseph was in Egypt under Pharaoh. Okay, prime minister. Okay, and he's over top of the other pillars. Okay, and you have what they call you have 2 Qadi Askars. They're regular army judges of the army. Okay, and then you have the third pillar is called the Deftadars, and they were the bookkeepers and the accountants of the Ottoman Empire, and the 4 treasurers of the exchequer and the financial administration. Okay, and the 4th pillar is the Nasanjis. It's the chancellor and secretaries of state. Okay, this is all the Divan right here. Now, let's follow this down, the chart down. The second pillar under the Qadi Askars are regular judges of the regular army. Let's follow it this way. You have the judge of Anatolia, the regular army Asia. Under him, you have the Baylor Bey of Anatolia, the governor general. Okay, then it splits twice. Okay, you have the Sanjak Beys, the Sipahis, and the Turkish cavalry and heavy artillery. Okay, splitting off from the Sipahis down here. Under them, you have the irregular tribal raiders, the cavalry of the Askanjis, okay? Then you have the Bashi Bazuks, the irregular infantry. And then coming down here, you have the Azabs, which Azabs are infantry militia. Okay, now back up here to the Baylor Bey, he's also over the Ottoman Navy. And the Sea Ghazis, Ottoman pirate raiders. No, Sea Ghazis are not a shellfish people. They're not, hey, I want to order a Sea Ghazis on a half shell and give me some tartar sauce with it. Yum, yum. No. That if you want to eat Sea Ghazis, you're going to be a cannibal because they're people, they're not shellfish, and what they were. You remember how the Ghazis were the warriors of holy warriors like Mujahideen? Well, these Sea Ghazis are pirates that took to the sea. And interestingly enough, America's first overseas war was against Islamic extremist Sea Ghazis of the Ottoman Empire. President Thomas Jefferson sent the Navy over to deal with them. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, yeah, to deal with Sea Ghazis that were operating out of Ottoman ports in Tripoli and Algeria and Iran. And that's where the Marine Corps him from the halt of Montezuma. So they were serving up Sea Ghazis they were serving them up on a Marine Corps Sabre is what they were doing. Okay, never mind. I won't quit my day job. I'll quit singing here. Okay, now back up here to the top, here to the second pillar under him also on this side. Okay, now this judge of Rumelia or Europe. Okay, this is the high command of the regular army of native Turks. Okay, so this is like the general staff here. And under them you have the Baylor Bey of Rumelia, Governor General, and then he's also connected into with his portion of the Ottoman Navy and the Sanjak Bey. And this is the same as these. His office is the same, except this is in the one half of the empire, and this is in the western half of the empire. So these offices are all the same as I just discovered there. Okay, now coming back over here, you have the Sultana, the Empress, okay, and of course she's the queen. And then you have the chief of the black eunuchs, and they were the sultans. They were the black eunuchs were the guards of the harem in the palace. Okay, and that basically covers the structure of the Ottoman government up until the time that Mehmed, it's established by Mehmed. Okay. Now this next chart here you're looking at is the political and territorial organization. Okay, you have Istanbul, the city of the Sublime Porte. You have, and then this is a territorial organization based closely on what the army was. You have West Rumelia was ruled by the Baylor Bey. The Sanjaks, not Sanjaks, but Sanyaks, as I guess how you would say that, was governed by a Sanyak Bey, and a Zimet, that's large fiefdoms and feudal domains governed by a Sabahi, and then here you have the Timar, small feudal domains governed by a Sabahi, and then over here you have native princes, countries ruled by local rulers subject to the Turkish tribute and satellite kingdoms, and then basically you have this East Anatolia is the same as the West. And away from Istanbul, the empire was closely linked in administration to the army, whose chief were external military agas or officers and were distinct from those of the court. They were native Turks and Muslims from birth. They represented the Sultan's executive authority under the division of the empire in provinces under central control was conditioned by military factors. Officers were also given the title of nobility, which is Pasha. They were given a standard which distinguished the rank of Pasha that the person held. And that was distinguished by the number of horsetails that were on the banner. The highest pashas were those of the Sublime Porte, with the highest being Pasha of 5 tails. This was the level of Pasha held by the Grand Vizier. Pasha of 5 tails was the Grand Vizier, 4 tails was the court agas, and Pasha of 3 tails also court agas. Pasha of 2 tails was the Baylor Bey, and a Pasha of 1 tail was the Sanjak Bey. Okay, and the codification of Islamic law, the entire system is modified and supplemental by Mehmed the Conqueror, was called the Kanun Name. And what the Kanun Name was a book of laws and regulations drawn up at his command toward the end of his rule. It covered the hierarchy of the empire, its customs, ceremonies, its duty and its institutions, its revenues and the penalties it was entitled to oppose. And basically what it combines is the Turkish tradition to Islamic law, Islamic Sharia law from the Quran and the Hadith. Now, the Ottoman state was a jihadist warring state from its foundation. From its very foundation, it was by integral, it was a warring state. And in the 1280s, until the overthrow in 1923 of the Sultanate Caliphate and its conversion into the Ottoman Republic of Turkey by Pasha Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And here's a short list of the wars that they were fighting. You had a jihad against the Eastern Roman Empire, 1453. Jihad against the Serbs and the Bulgars. War with Count Dracula of Transylvania. You didn't know he really existed, did you? Blood, blood, I want blood. Well, he wanted blood all right, but it wasn't from somebody's neck. It was from impaling him. He was called Vlad the Impaler, and he was a very dangerous, dangerous person. Turks went into his palace one time there in Bukovina or Bucharest, and he demanded that they remove their fezzes before they came in. They wouldn't do it, and he said it wasn't their custom, so he had those things nailed to their heads. This Vlad Stepish was he was no nice person. he solved poverty in his country by taking a whole bunch of poor people and burning them alive at a banquet. And he was no Christian. He was no Jew. He was a very cruel ruler who owed his position as Prince of Transylvania, Prince Vlad. He owed his position to the King of Hungary, who tolerated his excesses because Dracula's his military campaigns against the Turks were successful for him in a lot of cases. Okay. Wars against the Albanians of Skanderbeg. Skanderbeg, that was Iskander. Skander is Alexander. Beg comes from Bey, and that was the title. Alexander, his title being Bey, because he was supposed to be was appointed a Bey by the Turks, and he gets this. He revolted against them, and this was before the conversion of the Albanians to Islam. The modern Albanians, a lot of them are Islamic. Okay. But in this time they weren't. So let's get this name, Skanderbeg, okay? And he fought the Turks out in Kosovo. Okay, then you have a jihad against the Knights Hospitaller Crusaders on the island of Rhodes, conquest of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs, wars against the Shiites of Persia, war with the Turkoman tribe of the White Sheep under Amir Uzun Hassan, war against Mamluk Turks in Syria, Israel, Arabia, and the conquest of Egypt. A war with the Mamluks is an Ottoman milestone, okay, because they held themselves to be the leaders of the Muslim Ummah. Remember, that's the community, because they possessed the banner and cloak of the Prophet Muhammad. Sultan Selim I with Sunni Abbasid Caliph Ali Mutawakkil in tow, after capturing him from the Mamluk Turks, seized Cairo and defeated the Mamluk Sultan Tuhman Bey in the battle at the pyramids and hanged him. The banner and cloak was taken back to Istanbul, and it was understood that the office of Caliph had passed to the Ottoman Sultan. The Ottoman Empire thus becomes the new Sunni Muslim Caliphate, and it was also during this war that Jerusalem fell into Ottoman hands. And these devout Sunni Muslims at no time put an Ottoman capital in Jerusalem, nor was it ever a major religious or commercial center in the Ottoman domain. So again, we have another big Muslim empire state that does not establish Jerusalem as the capital. So let's we can discount another Palestinian claim there. They rebuilt the walls. The Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and is also known in the West as the Magnificent, but Suleiman the Lawgiver, and Suleiman, as we've seen earlier, Suleiman is the name of the Islamic name Solomon. So this is a Turkish guy named Solomon, and he refurbishes the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then, but otherwise he lets Jerusalem fall into ruin and decay after this. And they have wars with the Italians, 2 wars with Austria and Poland, with 2 attacks against the city of Vienna, and this carried jihad into the heart of Europe. Navy jihad of sea Ghazis, not shellfish. Now, remember that, don't be confusing this with shellfish, against the merchant commerce of Portugal, Spain, Genoa, and others. Support of non-Turkish sea Ghazis, the Barbary Pirates, again, that's not a baseball team, you know. All right, the Barbary Pirates, we got a batter up there, he's ready to go. Wham! No, this is not the Barbary Pirates here, these are other kind of pirates, but at the same time, they're not pirates like Long John Silver. Arr, may he pirates there, you know, be a Blackbeard, you get drawn in Carter. No, it was not English pirates or anything like that. These are Islamic pirates, okay? Then they were defeated by the United States Merchant Marines, or Marine Corps, I should say, because they were attacking the Merchant Marines. Crimean Wars, they tried to invade Russia. How many people are going to make that mistake? It wasn't just the little mad corporal with the Charlie Chaplin mustache that invaded them, and the other little short Frenchman there with a big hat and a gray coat, Napoleon. The Turks tried it, you know, and they failed just as miserably as everybody else has that's invaded Russia, except for the Mongol Empire. Mongolia Mongols are the only ones ever to conquer Russia, and they did it in the middle of the winter time by the Mongols. Genghis Khan, his General Subutai, rode up the Volga River in the wintertime while it was frozen and destroyed Kievan, Russia. Okay, they're the only ones that ever succeeded in doing that. Okay, and Crimean Wars, invasion of Russia around Kiev, an alliance with Crimean Tatar Khans, and they fended off Western counterattack by Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, the next subject we're going to be discussing is Persia under the rule of Shiite Islam. This Persia under the rule of Shia Islam, and what they're doing, okay, they're constantly in intrigue against the Sunni Ottomans, and they kept, like I was saying, they kept Turkey pinned down in numerous wars on an eastern front. The Turks were unable to ever throw their entire force in one massive single jihad. And this allowed the states of Europe, who were also fighting against themselves, time to outpace the Turks in technology and tactics. And so what we have going on, people, is when the last great Ottoman attack on Europe came in 1683, led by Pasha Black Mustafa, a combined force of Poles, Italians, Austrians, and other Germans drove the Turks away from Vienna, and they turned the tide. Okay, let's a few names and terms to remember. You have Ghazi, the Turkish holy warrior. Sea Ghazi, the Turkish pirates. We know by now it's not a shellfish. Mehmed the Conqueror conquered Eastern Roman Empire in 1453 through 1463. Suleiman the Lawgiver, greatest Ottoman ruler, rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem as we see them today. Hunyadi. Now, Pastor John of Beth Shalom Messianic, my dear friend and brother, he'll appreciate Hunyadi because Pastor John's background comes from a Hungarian background, and Hebrew-Hungarian background. And Hunyadi was a Hungarian warrior. He was fighting the Turks in 1460. And of course, Vlad Dracula, Count Dracula, Romanian leader fighting the Turks in the 1460s. Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, that's the great cathedral in Constantinople built by the Roman Emperor Justinian, turned into a mosque by Mehmed the Conqueror. Sanyak Bey, the Turkish provincial governor. Pasha, the Turkish title of nobility. Janissary Corps. Okay, we mentioned them earlier on the chart, the Janissary Corps. Okay, this deserves some discussion here. The elite personal army corps of the Sultan, made up of people who have been kidnapped from non-Turkish Christian and Jewish families when very young, raised by fanatic Muslims to wage jihad and to put down rebellions by Turkish and or other Muslims. They would take these boys, and Vlad Dracul, his brother Radu, was taken when he was a boy, and he was abused, homosexually abused by Mehmed the Conqueror, and later on, he was given to the Janissary Corps, and he ended up fighting his own brother in battle in Romania. Very sad, unfortunate turn of events. And Then remember now the Grand Vizier, ruler under the second ruler under the Sultan, like a prime minister. It's Sanyak, the Turkish province. Zimet, large feudal domain with a Sanjak, within a Sanjak. And Timar is a small feudal domain within a Sanjak. Qadi is a Turkish judge. They have a lot of these same titles today in the Muslim world. Qadi. Sublime Porte with the name of the Imperial Ottoman government. Devshemer, law of tribute children. This is the law that they had to where they got the children for the Janissary Corps that we just discussed. Okay, law of tribute children is an evil law, and it legalized the kidnapping by the Sublime Porte of non-Muslim children and converting them to Islam as slaves of the Sultan to serve either as at court or as sex slaves, but mostly for the Janissary Corps. These people were not nice at all to the children. They were evil to the children, and the Lord Yeshua is going to come back and he will judge all of that. Remember what we said earlier about those who hurt children. It were better for them than a millstone were hanged about his neck, and they were drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to that man on the day of judgment. White eunuchs, palace personnel, black eunuchs, workers serving in the harem, Grand Mufti, chief Islamic cleric of the Sublime Porte, interpreter of Islamic law, Kanun, and not canon like a gun, but Kanun, book of laws for Ottoman Turkey drawn up by order of Mehmed the Conqueror. The four pillars of empire system derives in martial terms from the four roles or four poles of the tents of the early Ottoman princes. The number 4 is applied to the pillars had a sacred significance, symbolizing the 4 angels which according to the Quran support the throne, the 4 companions of the prophet who became the 4 caliphs, and the 4 winds of heaven. And then of course we discussed this earlier, how the first pillar was the Grand Vizier, the second pillar the 2 Qadi Askars, judges of the army, and nominated other Qadis. And the third pillar, the Deftadars, accountants, the financial administration. And the fourth pillar, the Nizamjis, secretaries of state, who drew the Sultan's edicts and placed it on it his seal. You know, a seal of approval, you know, is well, that will conclude this section, this video of the Wrath of Allah, the video part 1, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, when we take up the next video on this, the next study, then we will be discussing Islamic doctrine versus Judeo-Christian doctrine. We'll continue in with the study of the Ottoman Empire in its fall, and how countries like Saudi Arabia and Jordan will also be discussing Islam and prophecy. So with that, we'll conclude with a word of prayer. And Lord in heaven, I ask that you protect and guide us and guard us, Lord. And I ask that you take this knowledge to whoever receives this, Lord, that they would be warned as to what's going on, and that it would inspire them to study the Scripture and the prophecies, Lord, and the things to come, and to pray for people, Lord. And I ask these things in the name of our blessed Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. May the Lord God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you. May he lift up his countenance towards you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.
All the nations stand against you. Who among them is your friend? The king is calling from his throne in Jerusalem, seeking those that he might send. The Holy Spirit is my armor. The Word of God is my sword. I am going into battle for Zion in the army of the Lord. I am going into battle for Zion in the army of the Lord. So be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Be alert with perseverance for the saints, and be praying at all times. The Holy Spirit is my armor. The Word of God is my sword.